the SMG-72 Pummeler. If you think this is a bad weapon, then you are using it wrong. And in this video, we're going to go back in time and talk about this gem of a weapon that came from the Polar Patriots War Bond. But before we get into the video, if this is your first time visiting the channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and let's get started. The Pummeler is one of my favorite weapons in Helldivers 2 because it's very unique and doesn't really function as a workhorse weapon as like something like the other SMGs or ARs, but it has this like special functionality that makes it very fun to pair with other weapons. And with the last major update, we got weapon customization. So let's go over that first. Now, first up with weapon customization for the Pummeler here, we had the optics. All of them are pretty similar, but I do like the holographic sights for this. Now, I know a lot of you are probably sitting there thinking, why don't you go with the red dot scope there? And that's because I really don't like this sight specifically. So not the 1.5 red dot, but this 2 times red dot. I do not like this sight for like any weapon. But if you want to take it for that extra magnification, that's not a big deal because it really doesn't hurt your ergonomics that much. Now moving on to the underbarrel, really not a lot of options here. It's either you want the flashlight or you don't. If you take the flashlight, again, it's going to hurt your handling. Now when it comes to the muzzles, I'm going to be honest, if you look how they affect the stats, it's all very minor. And when you shoot them all side by side with all the different muzzles, I can't really tell the difference. Take a look. Well, gee there, Mr. Nomad, you're not doing a very good job selling me on this weapon here. Hey, hold on, hang on. Still got a lot more to talk about. Moving into the magazine section here, I think each one of these magazines actually is really great for the Pummeler. You have the extended, which is kind of the in-between for the drum and the short mag. Having either the extended or the short mag is really going to help the ergonomics of this weapon to feel a lot snappier. Now, out of these 3 magazines, I do prefer the drum mag, and that's because the Pummeler here has a slower fire rate. Now, after weapon customization, if we talk about the base stats here, 70 damage. With that drum mag, we have a capacity of 75. The recoil is really low, and that fire rate is also pretty slow as well. Now, in the Pummeler weapon description, it says it fires concussive rounds that staggers enemies. That stagger verbiage right there is not a good use of that word because stagger and stun are 2 different things in this game. And while this SMG does have some stagger, the main feature here is the stun effect it has. A weapon with good stagger will push enemies back. A weapon that stuns will stop an enemy right in their tracks. And before we move on to how this weapon performs against the individual factions, we should talk about the durable damage it does. And it only does 7 durable damage, and comparing it to the other SMGs, that's pretty low. Something that does a lot of durable damage, just so you can see the number difference here, is the Eruptor, which is at like 115. So a pretty big difference there, but we're just laying out all of our cards so you don't think I'm blowing smoke up your ass. Well, okay, how does this weapon perform? Well, if you're trying to use this as a workhorse weapon, like I said at the beginning of the video, you're using it wrong. So we actually need to move to the armor perk section to get the full potential out of the Pummeler. Now, some of you veterans might be thinking out there, okay, just use the Siege Ready perk and we'll call it a day. It's going to give you faster reload speed and extra ammo capacity. And honestly, it's a pretty good choice. But it's not what I use to get the full potential out of this weapon. And for that, we need to talk about the Gunslinger perk, which increases your reload speed. It makes drawing and holstering the gun much faster, and also a lot less recoil when using a sidearm. And so now when we talk about fighting the individual factions, I want you guys to think back to this armor perk and how we're pairing it with the Pummeler to get some really great results. And so how the playstyle is going to be, anything that's like light or I'd say like medium chaff, you can use the Pummeler and it's going to work just fine because you stun those targets and then you can take your time to aim for those weak points and take them out really quick and efficiently. But for those heavier targets, something like an Alpha Commander, stunning it right in its tracks and then quickly switching to something like the Senator and blowing off his head, ooh, it's a very satisfying gameplay loop. Now, I just mentioned the Senator as the sidearm, but honestly, you can use any, I would say, heavy hitting sidearm, hell, even the grenade pistol. But for this video, you're going to see me using the big iron, the Senator. Now let's move on to how it performs against each of the factions, because some of the factions I recommend and some I don't. Now, right off the rip, I would love to show the Pummeler versus the Illuminate, but yeah, they're nowhere to be found at the moment because we kicked their ass so hard on Super Earth. And mark my words, we're going to go through that Meridian Singularity to basically take the fight back to the Illuminate, wherever the fuck they came from, other galaxy, other solar system, because we have that black hole just sitting there. But when it comes to the squids there, obviously voteless, no problem for the Pummeler at all. And then same goes for the Watchers. Those things are pretty elusive, so being able to basically stop them in their tracks and take them down efficiently, Pummeler's really good at that. Now, when we move on to the heavier chaff, that's the Overseers, and there are many varieties. That Pummeler and then sidearm combination, this really comes into play because targeting the Overseers, their chest piece or even their legs, getting them locked down and then switching to your sidearm, in this case the Senator, and then blowing off their head in one shot, really satisfying, really efficient, especially for the elevated Overseers because they like to fly around, so being able to stop them with the Pummeler and then quickly switch to your sidearm for an easy kill, that feels really good. And so after the Overseers, I really want to highlight how the Pummeler handles flesh mobs because the flesh mobs, they don't have any armor, so you can hit them anywhere. And if we have something like the drum mag, we're going to be able to put enough bullets into the flesh mob to stop it and stun it. Obviously, this will help you get away from a flesh mob and gain a little distance, but it'll also give you enough time to switch to your stratagem weapon or something like the grenade pistol to clean them up very quickly and safely. And then obviously when it comes to something like the Stingray and the Harvester, the Pummeler does not punch above its weight class, so we don't even need to talk about those. It's not a viable option against them. So overall versus the Illuminate, a big thumbs up for the Pummeler. Definitely worth taking out whenever they show up again. And knowing my luck, they'll pop up again as soon as this video is done recording. Anywho, moving on to the Terminids, I think the Pummeler, this is where it really shines because the Terminids like to swarm and the Pummeler is a great crowd control weapon. We haven't mentioned it yet, but the Pummeler does allow you to run and gun because it is one-handed, meaning you can run away while shooting behind you. And because it's one-handed, you can also pick up objectives like the mutated egg or use something like a ballistic shield, although I wouldn't recommend that. But because the Pummeler does such an excellent job at stunning the light chaff, it's really easy just to spread out your shots and stun an entire advancing line of bugs at you. And the damage is good enough to basically pop off something like the Warriors' heads, even the Alpha Warriors that come from the Alpha Commanders. Now, where that weapon swapping really shines, I think is against like the Nursing Spears and the Bile Spears. You can stun the Bile Spears if you shoot them in their sack, but the rest of their body is armored. So along with using that swap technique versus the Alpha Commanders, I highly recommend using it against the Spewers as well. Another place the Pummeler shines against the Terminids is against Predators. The Predator swarm there, the Hunter and the Stalker variant, are very aggressive and they're very fast. So having something that slows them down and taking out their heads is very useful, keeping you safe and alive. And did I mention the regular Stalker? Yeah, not a problem either with the Pummeler. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, how does it perform against Chargers? Because, you know, they do have that weak spot in their butt. And this is where that firing rate, that slow fire rate, kind of gets the Pummeler into not viable territory against something like the Charger here, which has a lot of health, but also it takes a lot of bullets to stun this thing. Because yes, the Pummeler can stop a Charger, but the amount of ammunition it would take to actually stun it and lock it in place, it's way too much. I don't consider it viable or something you should be looking to do with this weapon. So against the Terminids and the Predator Swarm, yeah, big thumbs up for the Pummeler, probably where it excels the most. Let's move on to the bots. Now when it comes to the Automatons, really the Pummeler is going to struggle. And I say this talking about tier 10. Obviously something like Troopers, not a big deal. And it actually does a good job at stopping and killing Berserkers. But outside of those, you're going to have a lot of Devastators, or I should say upgraded Devastators, where they have the shields, they have the rocket pods, and if you're going against the Incineration Corp, they have like flame shotguns. So getting up close or in that close to medium range can be kind of dangerous for the Pummeler here. Because although you can stun something like the Rocket Devastator by shooting it in its rockets, dismantling it or trying to get that headshot on it, I don't find it very easy with the Pummeler. And when it comes to the Devastators with shields, yeah, you kind of either got to shoot them in the arm or try to get an angle like on their belly area. But overall for me, against the Automatons, the primary weapons I like, they're either precise and or have medium penetration. And the Pummeler here really doesn't boast a lot of damage. And again, you're going to have to be in that close to medium range. Now you could pair the Pummeler with something like the Shield Generator backpack or a ballistic shield or even the directional shield. But because the Automatons are just full of so many rockets and things that can ragdoll you around, I just don't think it's worth it. So unfortunately, yeah, against the Automatons here, I do not recommend bringing the Pummeler. But something I will say is the Pummeler is actually pretty good at taking out Hulks if you can get to their weak point. Because if you put enough shots into it, the Hulk will stay in place and the Pummeler does have enough damage to destroy those. Some other light pen primary weapons, you may be able to shoot that weak point, but the Hulk is going to turn around and either slap you or catch you on fire or something like that. So there is a little benefit to the Pummeler. So those are my thoughts on the Pummeler. Just a quick recap, I highly recommend recommend using it against the Illuminates and the Terminids, especially the Predator Swarm. Now you can use the Siege Ready perk and get a lot of use out of the Pummeler, but I think it really shines with the Gunslinger perk and basically swapping between your primary and your secondary, and hell, even your stratagem weapon, to really get the most use out of that stun effect that the Pummeler has. But that's it for the video. If you made it this far, thank you very much. I think in this series here, we'll just kind of talk about my favorite weapons and basically what weapon customization brings to them. And in the Pummeler's case, I really like the drum mag. I know the muzzles are kind of like hit or miss, but I'm very, very happy with the weapon. Anyways, that's all. So I will see you guys next time. Peace. Take care.